Namaskar. Today, the subject is the science of God's grace. I was thinking about the autobiography of a yogi when Yoganandaji was quite young. He was on the balcony with his sister, and some boys were playing with the kites. And Yoganandaji he was just a young boy, but he made a comment. He says, I guess, I don't remember the beginning of the story exactly, but he was enjoying the kites, and then for some reason he said to his sister, yes, well, maybe the sister said, well, you'd like one of those or something. He says, yeah, well, Divine Mother will give me whatever I want. And the sister says, oh, you shouldn't be so egotistical and sure of yourself when that's, not even remotely true. And so he said, okay, you see. He began to pray. And soon enough, the boys with the string in the glass, and the string broke. One of the kites flew right, got caught by the roof, came right down into his hand. And of course, his sister became all excited and ran to go tell Mom. In the West, I didn't really grow up with any sense of grace. I grew up in a Jewish family, and they never talked about God at all. And as I began to know some Christians and Catholics and such, and they talk about grace. And when I was a young boy, even though I didn't know anything about the subject, do you know miniature golf? Yes? You know the little course where you putt and you... I've seen miniature golf here in India. Not many, but a few. My father's office had a miniature golf course right across the street. And so when he got really to the point where if we were visiting his office and we were bothering him, he would say, okay, go play miniature golf. He'd give us money. We'd go over there and play. And one day I was over there, and as I was playing, I was maybe 8, 9 years old, and I was playing. And the thing about miniature golf is that in these courses, at the very last hole, if you got a hole-in-one, then you got to play a free pass to play again. So as I was playing on the course, I was putting each time, and all the time I was thinking about this hole at the end and about getting this hole-in-one. And I began to think, as children often do, what could I do to increase my chances of getting a hole-in-one? And I decided in the end that I wasn't sure if God existed, but if God existed, then God could help me. So I prayed to God. But I thought, well, I'm going to pray to God, but I've got to give something. If I want something, I have to give something. And so in the end, I couldn't think of, what can an 8-year-old boy give God, the creator of the universe? He already has everything. And in the end, I decided that I'd have to give him at least something that was hard to do. So I decided that I would give God, I told God, listen, okay, if you give me a hole-in-one, I will try to behave. Because this was going to be hard. And it was big. I had to offer something big. It was a hole-in-one. So I prayed, and just before I hit the ball, I said, okay, God, this is it. I accept the bargain. and I hit the ball, and sure enough, it went in the hole. And of course, then I didn't know exactly what it meant to be good, so that, but it was a very real conversation that I had in my mind, and I think it was consistent with most people's impression that if you want God to do something for you, you have to do something for God. Because life is a kind of a bargaining table. And that this is how you get ahead with the guy upstairs. But at other times, people just, they call out to God, they pray, especially when things go bad in life. Isn't it so that when there's a disaster, oh my God, and why me? And then the intent desire for things to be different than they are. And then the prayers start, the call, Lord, fix it, change it. I want it to be something else. And the thing is that sometimes you know people pray, and sometimes you've prayed yourself. Sometimes your prayer is answered, and sometimes it's not. And you're wondering, And of course, when people's prayers don't get answered, they often will become angry. They become angry with God. Why didn't you answer my prayer? Or they'll do a real classic, which, well, I didn't really think God was going to do it anyway. Well, both of those circumstances become self-fulfilling in the sense that we have this belief. We have beliefs about God, and those beliefs don't make that the actual situation. Kriyananji wrote in one of the books, he said, people really believed that the earth was flat. But that didn't make it flat. Just believing in God doesn't mean that God exists. So, well then, where does that leave us? How would we know if God exists? Well, how do we know that we are existing right here, right now? We're experiencing it. We don't know the totality of the experience, but we do know what we're experiencing, at least the bandwidth that we're able to perceive. This is happening. How it's happening, why it's happening, all those details we don't fully understand. But we do know that, for example, if you step into a puddle, your feet are going to get wet. If you walk out into the rain without an umbrella, the water will fall on your head. If you eat food that's spoiled, you'll get sick. We learn. We learn from experience. And we learn from the experiences of others. And this learning process, in the most precise way, describes that which is scientific. When we talk about science, we talk about how to observe life, the process of observation, and the ability to hypothesize about what might take place, and then we have experiences that tells us, oh, when you do this, this happens. And if somebody else does this and the same thing happens, then you go, oh, well, it's, becomes a scientific process, something that's repeatable. Well, we know that there's many stories in the spiritual history of the world about incredible things that we don't understand how they take place. Many of the great saints throughout history have raised the dead. People who were dead. And they brought them back to life. And you never hear stories about the saints trying to raise the dead. They always raise. They don't just try, they do. Now, many parents have prayed to raise the dead of their child, their loved ones, but they didn't raise. Why? What was the difference? And this is really what we want to figure out. Whether it's something that we need outwardly or it's something that we seek inwardly, there's something that different between the average person's seeking grace and the saints. And that difference is the key for us to understand where we stand and what we can do to improve our circumstances. Grace is not arbitrary, it's not whimsical. Yoganandaji said God doesn't just, sit up there looking around going, oh, I think I don't like him today. It's not like that at all. There's an order, there's a mechanism to life. Of course, we're all familiar with the concept of karma and the concept of the evolution of the soul through many incarnations. And this helps us to understand that we have, through previous incarnations, put ourselves into the certain circumstances that we're in. And now, as Jesus said, as you sow, so you reap. As Einstein, or as Newton said, or who was it? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So there's this mechanism in life, and even though not everybody believes that this karmic mechanism goes from life to life to life, the reality is that it explains a lot about how life works. So we can begin to understand that something that could happen to us, whether it be what we would describe as good or bad, something that we would like, something that we wouldn't like, could come from some action that we don't remember having acted. And then, of course, when we live with groups of people, and then if we consider the whole world and the universe, we see that the actions of life are not just dependent upon one person, but on groups of people, on a planet full of people, a cosmos full of people, of the creation works on the microcosmic and the macrocosmic level. So the saints, when they decide to act, what is it that motivates them? And this is a key thing to understand, that it's not enough just to ask for some good thing to happen. What could be bad about asking for your sick child to not die but to live? There could be no bad thing in that thought. But what would determine whether that child lived or not? Well, we could say their karma. Their karma from the past drew that circumstance, and then now there's a new moment. Remember the now. Now that karmic debt has come to be collected. But then the question is can you negotiate with the collector? Can any negotiations be made? Remember that story in the autobiography of a yogi when a master, I think it was cholera, he got cholera. He was very sick. And his mother said, look at the picture of Lahiri Mahashai. Ask for his blessing. And so Master turned and looked in the picture, offered himself up into the presence of Lahiri Mahashai, and he was healed. Now, what would have happened if he had not looked at the picture? Well, we don't know exactly. But we do know that an action, that active participation took place. And this is the key in understanding the science of God's blessings, God's grace for us, is that we have to enter into the process. If we're passive, then life will just toss us around. And we'll have good days and we'll have bad days. And we won't be affecting in the now how things proceed. Now, when you take on any new project, you don't know what level of success you're going to achieve when you start. But you start anyway. You give it a shot, you try, you do what you can do. And our life experience tells us over a period of time that sometimes when we try to do something, we'll have success. Sometimes we won't. But success breeds success. People who are successful in life are people who generally are successful in many areas of what they do. Maybe not every area. But the idea is that you can learn how to be successful. You have to have energy. You have to have concentration. You have to be a doer. You can't just sit back and think that something's going to take care of itself. This basic process is something that we can easily observe in life, and our own life experience tells us that it's true. Our common sense tells us that if we do nothing, nothing's going to happen. And I think it's very common for warriors to have the attitude that, well, if I die, at least I'm going to go down fighting. I'm not going to give up. And we respond in our own selves, we respond to acts of courage. We respond to acts of kindness. We respond to acts of love. We respond to acts of joy. We respond to that which happens. We're activated by those positive things that people do. And when our natural reaction to positivity is not, how dare you, I hate you. No, it's positive. It's unusual to have a negative reaction to positivity. Yes, there are negative people who do that. But when we become open to positive potential, we recognize it in others, and we're inspired by it, and we seek to improve it in ourselves. This action towards positivity is the basic mechanism of drawing grace. This, when we say positivity, we're basically saying, what are the positive expressions of spirit? When we attune ourselves to those positive expressions and then we express them, then we're activating a positive response from life. If for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, at least we know that if we smile, our smile energy has gone out. Now, when you smile at people, they don't always smile back. So you might wonder, well, where did my smile go? You know? But we can't see underneath the range of the vision of our eyes. But our hearts can see, our spirits can see things that our eyes cannot see. And when we begin to see with our spirit, when we begin to feel with our spirit, we begin to recognize that that the actions, that the things that take place on the outside of life have other things underneath them. For example, intentions. It's not just a question of what we do in life, but the intentions that we have underneath it. But are good intentions just alone good enough? Yoganandaji said, and I think he wasn't the only one who said this, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The great evil doers in the world probably, they all thought they were doing a good thing. Most of them thought, oh, I'm going to kill all these people, it's going to be better for the world. But they were crazy, they were wrong. But parents oftentimes make the mistake of, maybe if it's a parent who over-disciplines a child, but with good intentions. Oh, I want my child to be good. I want my child to be successful in life. But they may, with that good intention, overdo it. Or even the mother who overdoes the nurturing. And so then the young man never learns to stand on his own 2 feet. Mothers, your son should at least know how to make tea and toast. I have a lot of fun laughing at that. There's quite a few Indian fellows that I've met who just cannot do anything in the kitchen. It's like a foreign territory for them. So that's. But you see, good intentions. So there's a reality underneath life. If we want to talk about karma, we have to understand that the beneficial things in life are those which express what we call sattva guna, those elevating things, those things that are positive, those things that are expansive, those things that reflect spirit beyond the duality of the creation that we're living in. So God's basic nature, joy, expansion, giving, caring, loving, compassion, all of consideration for others, all of these positive qualities, when we express them, they are going into the vibrational, magnetic aura of our being. And that aura is our calling card in life. So when you have a positive, energetic, enthusiastic aura, then as you walk through life, it's more difficult for negativity to come in. But if you have a negative aura, then negativity can easily come in, and positivity is repelled by your consciousness. So if you look at the saints, what you see is the thing that makes them different than the average person who wants the universe to fulfill their desire, is that their aura, their magnetic field, is in harmony with the potential that they seek. And that they have been practicing in their lives the increasing of positive energy flow, the harmonizing of positive energy flow, things that we know that elevate the spirit, things that we know that bring us closer to God. And as you come closer to that God potential, to infinite spirit, you gain more access to that. So Yoganandaji, even at a young age, because he was born free, whatever he wanted, he got. Of course, he had to learn to control that, to understand that. And remember the story when he said that his sister would have a boil the next day, and she did. And then his mother said, oh no, you be very careful with that. The power of your word can do harm. You must only use it for good. The power of your word is your energy flow flowing towards truth. And when we remember the test of truthfulness in the Eightfold Path of Patanjali is that whatever you say will come true. That's why the saints are always very careful about what they say. Because if they promise something, it must come true. And the stories of the rishis, when they have a moment of distraction and they curse somebody and they can't really take it back, sometimes they can adjust it slightly. So we have to consider, what does it take for something to come true? And how is that different than if we ask God to do it? It becomes the same thing. Your oneness with God becomes manifest. God's nature is love. We are God's children. God loves us. God loves all children equally. But God is more able to fulfill the needs of those children that cooperate with the positive potential of life. But God does fulfill the negative desires of people too. The universe allows us to get ourselves into trouble, and then we get the fulfillment of negative desires, which lead to suffering. And God allows us to do that. So occasionally the parents allow the naughty child gets away with some stuff. But inevitably you realize that if the child does enough naughty things, then unpleasant results will come. And there's a story of when Master was driving across the United States in the very early years of his time in America, and there was two young men traveling with him, and the fellow driving, he was not really a devotee. And somehow he had gotten connected with the fellow, and so his idea of entertainment on this long drive was to aim at any little animals that got in the road. The little rabbits would run across the road, and he would aim for them and run them down. And of course, Master was shocked, and I was a little surprised that at least in the story, Master doesn't stop him after the first time. He doesn't actually stop him at all. But he does say that something really bad's going to happen if you don't stop. And then at one point, after some time, Master says, "Stop the car!" And the fellow did it. He stopped right away, and just as they stopped, the wheel fell off the back of the car. Had they not stopped then, they might easily have had a serious accident. So it's interesting that the Master didn't, first of all, stop the guy right then and there, and maybe even kick him out of the car if he was going to act that way. But he didn't. God allows us to do things that are harmful, it's easy to see that this is not a good idea, that the energy that we're putting out is going to lead to suffering. But God lets us do it. Well, it became quite clear that in this case that Master had to intervene. And the fact is that God does intervene much more often than we realize, because we can't see God up there going, "I'm intervening," And how many people have prayed and they got what they wanted and they thought, "Oh, it's just coincidence, it's okay," they don't think any more about it. But the reality is that if you look at history, you see that there is a history of universal response. And each of us have probably experienced that in some time. It's certainly taken place in our lives, but we don't always recognize it. How many, let me say it this way. If you know who your guru is, then this has taken place. Because finding your guru is an act of universal grace. One of the greatest acts of universal grace. Because when you have truly connected to a guru, then you are assured to find God, as long as you don't give up. And that guarantee this incarnation, but Yoganandaji has said that you could achieve liberation, Jivan Mukta, in this lifetime if you apply yourself. And so this application of our harmonizing with God's grace, this is what we need to do. This is what we're trying to do in all of the spiritual life. Is we're trying to act in ways that increase the chances of us living in God's grace. What is God's grace? God's grace is not always the avoidance of discomfort. The human mind, the ego says, no, I never want to be uncomfortable. The ego says, no, if God loves me, I'm never going to have another bad day. Well, history, we can believe that's true, but history doesn't prove that to be true. If you look at the lives of all of the great saints, you could even say that they have more problems than the average person. But it's interesting, even though they have those problems, they're not more unhappy than they're way more happy than the average person. For some reason, they're not affected by those problems, those challenges, in the same way as the average person is. Why is that? Because they have a relationship with grace, with God. What does that relationship include? Well, Master used to call God Divine Mother. What is the relationship with the Mother? Embracing, loving, positive, comforting. So if you live in your inner being in a comforting, universal love, joy relationship, you are not going to be affected by outward ups and downs the way the average person is. The average person has no aura of protection from their emotional I like, I don't like responses to life. So when they have a good day, yay! And when they have a bad day, ooh. And who do they blame? Whether they believe in God or not, they blame God. The key to understanding how we can draw on God's grace is to remember that it's in this relationship. Master had, from his earliest childhood, a relationship with God. And in that relationship, he applied himself. And the better relationship you have with someone, who do you go to when you need help? The people that you have the best relationship with. Yeah, everybody wants to have an inside help. This is very much a part of Indian culture. You got to go to a VIP who has access to your needs. Isn't that true? We go to somebody up there who can take care of things for us. There's nobody more up there than God. God is the up there. And when we live in such a way that we have a strong inner relationship with God, then we have access. Not because it's whimsical, but because we have chosen to make it important to us. When back in, I remember clearly, it was 1989. And I had just moved to a different city, and I was going to decided to take up a new profession. And so I decided to take up video production. And I had no training in it, but I decided to do it, and went to buy some equipment for that purpose. And the internet was happening at that time, although it was newer. And I went online and I found the lowest price in the country for the equipment that I wanted to purchase. But then I went to a local store and I got their price for purchasing the same equipment. And it was quite a bit more. It was, I don't know, $1,000 or $2,000 more. It was a good amount of money. But I made a decision after I walked out of that store, started thinking about it, and said, being in business, being in this business, isn't just about having equipment, but it's about having access to help when you need it. And if I purchase this equipment from the internet, then when I go into this place, which is the local place to get help, and I tell them, I need your help, and they said, where do you get your equipment? And I said, off the internet. How enthusiastic are they going to be to help me? Not very enthusiastic. Where if I purchase it from them, and then I make friends with them, express my appreciation, then I will have a relationship with these people. And true enough, just a couple of months after I purchased that equipment, they recommended me for a job that ended up lasting 15 years. Now, is this the approach that we're going to take with God? Oh Lord, I'm going to invest in our relationship so that I can get stuff from you. That was my intent with these people. I did become friends with them, more than just being a customer, because I consciously did it. But it's true that my initial motivation was realizing that I would get better customer service, that if my equipment broke down, I needed it back quickly, they would be more likely to help me than a company that I didn't know. And it was true, and they did. But is this how we're going to come to God? Well, it's not as simply as yes, no. Because if you invest energy in the relationship, it will improve. There is a certain amount of self-interest involved. And in the beginning, if that's what it takes, do it. But when you meet somebody new, you often find that you don't know where this relationship is going to go. And you then find that the relationship shifts from personal interest to genuine caring and ultimately to love. When you love somebody, you have no little self-interest. When you truly love somebody, you don't love them for what you're getting. You love them for that love that flows through you. You love them and you care more about their needs than your needs. And this is what our relationship with God. Karmakan is the idea of doing mantras for gifts is the beginning. And that's why they were created. The thought was, well, it's better to seek favors from God than not to think of God at all. But eventually, when you refine that relationship, it comes to a much higher level. And then it becomes love. And then if a child comes to the parent, half the time they don't even have to say a word. You just look into mom's eyes. She knows. She knows what you need. And it doesn't matter what you need, this is included. Isn't it? And that is our relationship with God. When we have taken our relationship with God out of the, I want this and I'll do this, like when I was a boy, I'll try to be good if you let me get the hole in one. But eventually it comes to love. It comes to the genuine good feeling, caring, that comes from the highest kind of relationship. And when we have that in this world, we're just touching it. Because when love comes through the ego, it gets stepped down. When love expands through the soul, it expands towards infinity. And love, God's love, is infinite. That we can't fully embrace that, but we can begin to imagine it the more we experience it. And this is one of the important things about deep meditation and expansion in meditation. is that if we want to feel God's grace more and more, we have to expand into the perception of that grace. We have to expand our ability to experience it. We can't think that God's love is just having a touch of it in meditation. Yes, that's sweet, but it's like a drop of Amrita, not bathing in it. We have to grow into bathing in God's bliss. And when we do that, then we free ourselves from the outward need to be concerned about how things go, because we live in that bliss. And then, as we feel inspired, we come to God and say, Lord, what are we going to do about this situation or that situation? Remember the deer at Ranchi, and Master prayed that the deer wouldn't die, and the deer lived. But then the deer came to him in a dream and said, "You're holding me back, let me go." And so Master said, "Okay, I release you." And what he was saying is, Lord, I prayed for what I wanted, and you gave it to me. But I give that up in this greater good. And this we need to do. We need to recognize ever greater goods in life. That ever greater truth, that Dharma, that is so much bigger than the little view that we often have about, oh, I don't want this little injury. I don't want this loved one to pass into the next world. I don't want, the world to be at war. Who wants the world to be at war? No sane person wants the world to be at war. But we realize that this God's creation is a much larger process than our ego's view. And so then we begin to accept that this creation is God's, but that we can live in harmony with infinite spirit, and through that relationship we can create the greatest good for ourselves and others. And that good, no matter what it looks like on the outside, on the inside, it's filled with happiness, with bliss, with love, with caring, with every positive quality that we want. And when we live in that, we begin to trust. We trust that no matter what life looks like on the outside, God's grace is filling us on the inside. And that is the secret, the understanding that helps us to live in God's grace. When we live in that grace, nothing can touch us on the outside. That's how the devotee lives. That's what we seek. And that's what the masters inspire us to do, is to live in that grace. Don't wait till tomorrow. That grace is present. Live in it today, and then expand your ability to perceive it every day. And then the only end result from that can be happiness, bliss, and the greater awareness of God's love.